My sister had already changed the locks on my mother's house, and the first time I found out was when my key stopped turning in the front door. I remember standing there longer than I should have, cold metal digging into my palm, trying it again like the door might suddenly recognize me. The street was quiet in that early afternoon way, mail truck humming somewhere down the road, a dog barking behind a fence. Nothing dramatic, nothing that should have felt like betrayal. And yet it did. When the door finally opened, it wasn't my key that did it. It was my sister, Alina, pulling it inward just enough to look at me through the narrow gap. Her expression didn't change when she saw me. That was the first thing that felt wrong. Not surprise, not guilt, just readiness, like she had been expecting this moment and had already decided how it would go. "You should have called," she said. Her voice was calm, in a way that made my chest tighten. "I did," I said. "Yesterday and the day before that." She shifted slightly, blocking the hallway behind her. I could smell disinfectant from inside, too strong, like someone trying to erase something they couldn't fully clean. "Mum's resting," she added, like that explained everything. I looked past her shoulder anyway. The hallway light was on even though it was midday. A coat I didn't recognize hung on the rack. A pair of men's shoes sat neatly aligned under the bench. That detail stayed with me longer than it should have. "This is still my mother's house," I said quietly. Alina exhaled through her nose, almost a laugh. "It's complicated." That word, complicated. She used it the same way our father used to when he didn't want to answer questions he didn't like. I stepped closer to the door, not forcing it, just enough for her to feel I wasn't leaving. "My key doesn't work," I said. "Why doesn't my key work?" For a second, something flickered across her face. Not guilt exactly, more like irritation that I'd noticed the detail instead of the bigger story she was trying to control. "Dad updated things before he got worse," she said. That wasn't true. Or at least, it didn't match anything I had been told in the last 6 months. Our father had been gone for nearly a year, and worse wasn't something you could apply to him anymore without it sounding like an excuse stretched too thin. I tried to breathe slower. The air inside smelled like lemon cleaner and something faintly medicinal underneath, like old pill bottles left open too long. "Where is Mom?" I asked. A pause, just a fraction too long. "She's here," Alina said. "She's just not well enough for visitors today." Visitors? That word landed strangely, like I was no longer part of the house I grew up in. From somewhere deeper inside, I heard the soft scrape of a chair. A cough, familiar but delayed in my memory, like hearing someone speak through a wall. "I'm not a visitor," I said. Alina finally opened the door wider, but only slightly. A controlled gesture, an allowance, not an invitation. "You've been busy," she said. "Work your own life. I've been here every day." Every day. She said it like it was a verdict. I walked inside anyway. The living room looked almost the same, but not quite. The blanket on the couch was folded differently. The family photos on the shelf had been rearranged. Our father's picture had been moved closer to the edge, while newer frames I didn't recognize filled the center space. The house didn't feel empty. It felt edited. "I spoke to the bank," Alina said behind me. That stopped me more than anything else. I turned slightly. "What?" "I'm handling things now," she continued. "Bills, care arrangements, power of attorney had to be adjusted." The word adjusted made my skin go cold. "I never signed anything," I said. She finally met my eyes properly then. Not soft, not angry, just steady. "You weren't here," she said. From the hallway, I heard my mother again. A chair shifting. A slow, uncertain voice calling a name, but not mine. Alina's name. And in that moment, something simple and devastating settled in my chest. Whatever had been happening in this house for the past months, I had not been part of it. Not even as a witness. Alina stepped aside, just enough for me to see down the hall. "Don't overwhelm her," she said softly. But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was looking at the closed bedroom door at the end of the hallway, realizing I didn't know who had been deciding what happened behind it. And I was suddenly no longer sure what I was about to find when I opened it. The bedroom door didn't open immediately when I knocked. That pause, just a few seconds of silence, felt heavier than anything Alina had said in the living room. I stood there with my hand still raised, noticing small things I shouldn't have been noticing. The paint near the doorknob was slightly chipped. A faint smell of lavender soap drifted through the crack beneath the door, too strong, like it had been used to cover something else. Then my mother's voice came, quiet and unsure. "Come in." It wasn't the voice I remembered from even a year ago. It was smaller, slower, like each word had to be found before it could be spoken. I pushed the door open carefully. The room was dim even though the curtains were open. Afternoon light filtered through thin fabric, softening everything it touched. My mother sat in a chair near the window instead of the bed. That detail hit me first. She had always hated sitting away from the bed when she was tired. A blanket was folded over her knees, too neatly, too deliberately. "Alina said you were resting," I said, keeping my voice steady. Her eyes lifted toward me, but there was a delay in recognition. Not confusion exactly, more like she was searching through layers of distance to place me correctly. "She worries too much," she said finally. I stepped closer. The floor creaked under me in the same place it always had. That sound used to mean comfort. Now it felt like I was disturbing something carefully arranged. "I've been trying to reach you," I said. "You haven't answered my calls." She looked down at her hands instead of answering. Her nails were shorter than I remembered. Clean, almost clinical, like someone had been making decisions for her body without asking her. "I get tired easily," she said. "Alina said it's better if I don't stress myself." That word, stress, sat in the air between us like a warning. I noticed the bedside table next. It had been cleared, almost completely. Only a glass of water and a small white pill organizer remained, divided into days of the week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all filled. "Are you okay?" I asked, though I already knew the question was too simple for whatever this was. She nodded too quickly. Yes, I'm fine. Alina takes good care of me." There it was again. Alina's name, placed gently into every sentence like it belonged there more than mine ever could. I sat on the edge of the bed without asking permission. The mattress dipped slightly under me, familiar in a way that made my throat tighten. "Do you remember when I visited last month?" I asked. A pause. "I think so," she said slowly. I waited, but she didn't continue. That was worse than denial. It was uncertainty shaped into agreement. "I brought you soup," I said. "You said it was too salty and then laughed about it." Her lips moved slightly, like she was trying to match the memory to something real. "Alina makes better soup," she said finally, almost apologetically. That sentence shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. From the hallway, I heard footsteps, measured, unhurried. Alina appeared in the doorway without entering fully, like she was monitoring the space more than participating in it. "She gets confused sometimes," Alina said gently. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her hair was tied back neatly, her posture calm, controlled. Everything about her suggested order. But order can be a form of control when it's used in the wrong hands. "What have you been telling her?" I asked. Alina didn't react immediately. That delay again, the practiced kind. "The truth," she said simply. My mother shifted in the chair. "Don't argue," she murmured without looking at either of us. That was the first moment I understood the shape of it. Not just exclusion. Rewriting. "I've been handling her care," Alina said, still calm. "Appointments, medication. The bank needed someone responsible." "I am her daughter too," I said. Alina finally stepped into the room. Not aggressively, just enough to close distance. "You were not here," she repeated. But this time, it didn't sound like a complaint. It sounded like a replacement. My mother's gaze drifted between us, unsure where to land, like she was afraid of choosing the wrong side of a conversation she didn't fully understand anymore. "I just want things to be calm," she said quietly. "Calm." That word again. It wasn't peace she meant, it was avoidance. Alina softened her voice as she approached her. See, she gets overwhelmed easily. We agreed it's better this way. We agreed. I felt something cold settle behind my ribs. That's not true, I said. We never agreed on anything. Alina didn't deny it immediately. Instead, she reached for the pill organizer and adjusted it slightly on the table, aligning it with the edge. A small, precise movement. You're emotional right now, she said. Not cruelly, almost sympathetically. That was what made it worse. My mother closed her eyes briefly, as if tired of the conversation before it had even fully formed. I do like when you two fight, she whispered. And suddenly, I understood something I hadn't wanted to see when I walked in. This wasn't just about access. It was about narrative. Whoever controlled the calm controlled the truth. Alina turned slightly toward me, her voice lowering just enough to feel private. If you want to be part of this, she said, you need to stop making it harder for her. Not a threat. A boundary. A rewritten one. And in that moment, standing in my mother's bedroom that no longer felt like mine, I realized the real conflict wasn't whether I was being excluded. It was how long it had been happening without me noticing. And what else had already been decided without my knowledge. The first thing I did the next morning was go to the kitchen, and I immediately knew something had changed in a way no one would admit out loud. The table was set for one person. Not two, not three, one. A single mug sat beside the sink, already used, the rim stained faintly brown with tea. The rest of the kitchen felt strangely unused, like it belonged to a version of the house that no longer existed. Even the air smelled different, less like food, more like cleaning products and closed windows. Alina was already there. Of course she was. She didn't look up when I entered, just continued stirring something in a small pot, slow and careful, like she had all the time in the world. You're up early, she said. I leaned against the doorway instead of sitting. I didn't sleep much. That was an understatement. The house had its own kind of silence at night now, structured, intentional. Not the familiar quiet of sleep, but something more controlled, like even the walls were being managed. Alina finally turned the heat down under the pot. She had a good night, she said. I didn't ask who she was. We both knew. What exactly is going on here? I asked. Alina sighed softly, as if I had asked this question too many times already. She's declining, she said simply. That word again. Declining, like my mother was a system instead of a person. I walked closer to the table. Declining how, when, according to who? Alina placed a spoon on the counter, with careful precision. Doctors, she said. Assessments, you weren't at the last appointment. I wasn't told there was an appointment. A small pause. That's because you weren't handling her care, she said. There it was again, that quiet rewriting of roles. Every sentence she spoke sounded like it had been rehearsed somewhere I wasn't allowed to attend. I pulled out a chair but didn't sit. Where are her records? I asked. Alina finally looked at me properly then, not surprised, not defensive, just steady. Why? She asked. Because I want to see what's been decided about her. Her gaze didn't move. You're not a doctor, she said. I'm her daughter. That doesn't give you automatic access to everything. The way she said it, calm, structured, made it feel like she had already spoken this sentence to someone else before. Maybe a lawyer, maybe a bank clerk, maybe even my mother. From the hallway, I heard a faint shuffle. My mother moving slowly, like mourning was something she had to negotiate with her body instead of wake into. Alina softened her voice instantly. She needs stability. I almost laughed, but it didn't come out. Stability, I repeated, or isolation. Alina turned back to the stove, refusing to engage with the question directly. That was something I was starting to recognize about her. She didn't argue in straight lines. She redirected them. She gets confused when too many people come and go, she said. That's not confusion, I said quietly. That's memory being replaced. The words hung there longer than I intended. Alina didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned off the stove and poured the contents of the pot into a bowl. The sound of liquid hitting ceramic filled the silence between us. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower. "You're tired," she said. "This isn't helping you think clearly." It wasn't concern. It was redirection again, always redirecting. I watched her carefully. "You changed the locks," I said. Alina didn't deny it. "It was necessary," she replied. "For what?" She placed the bowl on the table, then wiped her hands on a towel that was already perfectly clean. "For structure," she said. Structure. That word was becoming the center of everything she built. My mother entered the kitchen slowly, holding the wall slightly as she moved. She looked between us, her eyes lingering on the bowl first. "Smells nice," she said. Alina smiled immediately, soft, practiced. "I made it the way you like," she said. My mother sat down without looking at me. That wasn't intentional cruelty. It felt worse than that. It felt like habit. I stayed standing. "Mom," I said gently. She hesitated before looking up. "Yes. Do you remember when I last came here?" A pause. Her eyes moved slightly, searching. "I think last week," she said uncertainly. My stomach tightened. "No," I said softly. "It was 3 days ago." She frowned slightly, like I had given her a difficult math problem. "Alina said you've been busy," she said. There it was again. Alina said. Alina said. Alina said. I looked at my sister, but she was already watching me. Not challenging, just waiting, like she knew exactly how this would sound. "I didn't tell her that," Alina said calmly. My mother looked confused now, the smallest crease forming between her brows. "Didn't you?" she asked me. The question wasn't accusation. It was uncertainty looking for direction. And that was when I realized the most dangerous thing in this house wasn't anger. It was doubt being planted, gently enough that no one could see the hands doing it. Alina sat down across from her, adjusting the bowl slightly so it was perfectly centered. "She's just overwhelmed," Alina said softly. My mother nodded slowly, relieved by the explanation more than the truth. I stood there watching them, realizing something simple and unbearable. In this kitchen, I was no longer a participant in the story. I was becoming a disagreement. The bank called me before I even finished my coffee. I was still standing by the kitchen window, watching the same street I had driven down my entire childhood, when my phone vibrated against the counter. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something about this week had trained me not to ignore anything. "Hello, is this Myra?" the voice asked. "Yes." "This is regarding the joint authorization removal on the account of your mother." I went still. "Removal," I repeated. There was a small pause, the kind that usually means someone is checking notes they already expect to be controversial. "Yes," she said carefully. "Your sister submitted updated documentation last month. We've since transferred primary responsibility to her." I turned away from the window, without realizing it. "I'm also listed on that account," I said. "You were," she corrected gently. That single word landed harder than I expected. "I wasn't notified," I said. "We sent correspondence to the registered address on file." Alina's address, not mine. My grip tightened around the phone. "I want to see the documents," I said. "I can schedule an appointment." "No," I interrupted, sharper than I intended. "I want copies now." Another pause, longer this time. "I understand your concern," she said finally, in the voice people use when they're trained to de-escalate emotional situations they don't want to name directly. "But legally, the authorization has been updated and verified." Verified. That word didn't feel neutral anymore. It felt like something had been signed into existence without me in the room where it happened. When I hung up, the house felt different again. Not physically, just quieter, like it was listening. Elena was in the hallway when I turned around. Of course she was. You called the bank, I asked. She didn't deny it. That was her pattern now. I had to ensure continuity, she said. Continuity of what? She stepped closer, calm as always, too calm. Her care, she said. Her finances, her stability, you've been inconsistent. Inconsistent. I repeated, because I didn't move in and take over her life. Elena exhaled slowly. You visit when it suits you, she said. Then you leave, that's not stability. I felt something rise in my chest, sharp, not quite anger yet, more like recognition of how carefully she had been building this argument over time. I didn't leave her, I said. I have a job, a life. And I do, she replied. That stopped me for a second. Because that was the part she always used well, the part that made her sound reasonable. She worked part-time. She had been helping more since Dad died. She positioned herself as the one who stayed, and I as the one who drifted. And now that narrative had become paperwork. From the living room, I heard my mother coughing lightly. A fragile sound that used to make me move instinctively. Now I wasn't sure what my role was allowed to be. Elena softened her voice again. She trusts me, she said. It wasn't said as a victory, more like a fact she had carefully built. I looked at her for a long moment. Or she's been guided to, I said. That was the first time I saw something shift in her expression. Not anger, not guilt. Calculation. You're making this harder than it needs to be, she said quietly. That sentence should have sounded like concern. It didn't. It sounded like warning. I walked past her without answering and went straight to the study. The door creaked the same way it always had, but the room inside didn't feel the same. The desk was cleaner. Too clean. Papers organized into neat stacks. A folder labeled in handwriting I didn't recognize sat in the center. My mother's signature on a document inside was what shocked me first. It was the date. It was from a week after I had last spoken to her on the phone, when she had sounded perfectly normal. I didn't sign that, I said out loud. Elena appeared behind me in the doorway. You weren't here, she said again. But this time I turned. Stop saying that, I said quietly. A pause. She didn't move closer. She didn't need to. That's the truth, she said. I picked up the folder carefully, like it might change shape under pressure. There were medical summaries inside, too. Words like cognitive decline and limited capacity. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just carefully assembled language. Language that changes reality slowly enough that no one notices until it's already permanent. Did you talk to her alone about this? I asked. Elena didn't answer immediately. And that silence was answer enough. From down the hall, my mother called my name. My real name, not Elena. For the first time in days. I turned instinctively toward the sound. But Elena stayed exactly where she was. And in that moment, I realized something even more unsettling than the bank call. This wasn't just about control over money or decisions. It was about who my mother was allowed to remember clearly when she spoke. And whether I was still part of that version of her reality at all. My mother's voice came again from the hallway, weaker this time, almost unsure it had been heard the first time. Myra. I moved before I even decided to. The folder was still in my hand, half forgotten now, like paper couldn't compete with the sound of my name being spoken in a house that was slowly learning to forget it. Elena didn't stop me. She didn't follow either. That silence felt intentional. My mother was sitting on the edge of her bed when I reached her, not in the chair anymore. That alone made me uneasy. She used to prefer the chair because she said the bed made her feel like she was waiting for something bad to happen. Now she looked smaller in it, like the room had expanded and she hadn't. I thought I heard you, she said. You did, I replied, sitting down beside her carefully. Her hands were folded in her lap, but not in a natural way. Too neat again, like someone had taught her what calm hands should look like. Her eyes moved to the folder in my hand. "What is that?" she asked. I hesitated. That hesitation cost me more than I wanted to admit. "Just some papers," I said finally. She nodded slowly, like that explanation was enough, or like she didn't have the energy to challenge it. From the hallway, I heard Alina's footsteps, not rushing, never rushing, controlled pace. The sound stopped just outside the door but didn't enter. "She shouldn't be overwhelmed," Alina said gently. My mother immediately looked toward the doorway. "I'm fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. That response wasn't reassurance. It was permission-seeking. I turned slightly toward Alina. "She asked for me," I said. Alina didn't react. "She gets confused about timing," she replied. That word again, confused. It was becoming the foundation of everything in this house. I looked back at my mother. "Do you feel confused?" I asked her softly. A pause. She frowned slightly, as if trying to locate the correct answer in a place that no longer felt reliable. "I just get tired," she said. "Alina helps me keep things simple." Simple. Not calm this time, simple. There was a difference I couldn't ignore anymore. I noticed the glass of water on her bedside table. It was half full. There was a small pill resting next to it, already taken out of its compartment, waiting. "Do you know what those are for?" I asked. My mother glanced at them briefly. "For my nerves," she said. "The doctor said it helps me rest." "The doctor," I repeated. Alina's voice came from the doorway again, quieter this time but firmer. "She has a prescription plan," she said. "Everything is monitored." I stood up. "By who?" I asked. No answer immediately. That was the pattern now, not denial, delay. I looked at my mother again. "Mom," I said carefully, "when was the last time you spoke to your doctor alone?" She blinked slowly. "Alina comes with me," she said. "Always." She nodded. That single nod felt heavier than anything else that had happened that week. Alina stepped fully into the room now, finally crossing the threshold she had been avoiding. "It reduces stress," she said. "She gets anxious during appointments." My mother nodded again, almost grateful for the explanation being done for her. But something in me tightened. "Did she tell you I asked to come?" I said. My mother hesitated. "She said it might upset you," she answered carefully. The words weren't hers. I could hear it in the structure, in the phrasing, like someone had placed them gently into her mouth, and she was simply repeating them in a voice that no longer trusted its own direction. I turned to Alina fully now. "You're filtering what she hears about me," I said. Alina didn't react sharply. That was the most disturbing part. She stayed composed. "I'm protecting her peace," she said. "From what?" She looked at me for a moment before answering. "From conflict she can't process anymore." I almost laughed again, but it caught in my throat. "You mean me," I said quietly. A pause. She didn't deny it. From the bed, my mother shifted slightly. "I don't want you two to fight," she said again, softer now. "It makes my head hurt." That sentence did something subtle but devastating. It positioned me as the source of discomfort in a room where I had only just begun asking questions. Alina moved closer to the bed and adjusted the blanket over my mother's knees. "You should rest," she said gently. My mother nodded. And just like that, the conversation ended, not through resolution, but through exhaustion being redirected. I stood there watching it happen, realizing something I hadn't wanted to name yet. Alina wasn't arguing with me for control. She was reshaping what normal felt like in this house until my presence no longer fit inside it. And the worst part was how quietly it was working. Because even my mother, sitting right in front of me, was starting to treat my concern like noise instead of care. When I finally left the room, Alina followed me into the hallway. She didn't speak immediately. Neither did I. The silence between us felt different now, more structured, like both of us understood the rules shifting under our feet, even if neither of us had agreed to them. Finally, she said softly, "You're destabilizing her." And for the first time, I realized she genuinely believed it, or had trained herself to believe it so well that it no longer mattered whether it was true. And somewhere in that realization was the first clear sign that this wasn't going to resolve itself through explanation anymore. Because, in her version of reality, I was already the problem. The next morning, I found my mother's medication schedule taped to the inside of the kitchen cabinet. It wasn't new. That was the first unsettling thing. The tape had yellowed slightly at the edges, like it had been there longer than I had been allowed to notice it. But I hadn't seen it before. Not once. I stood there with the cabinet door open longer than necessary, reading the neat printed rows. Morning, midday, evening. Each slot filled with careful instructions and small handwritten notes in Alina's handwriting. Adjusted after breakfast, only if needed, take with food. Only if needed. That phrase kept repeating in my mind. Alina was already in the kitchen behind me. "You found it," she said. No surprise, no panic, just acknowledgement. I didn't turn around immediately. "How long has this been here?" I asked. "A while," she said. That's not an answer. A soft sound, she placed a mug down on the counter. Controlled, precise. "Since the doctor adjusted her plan," she said. I finally turned. "Which doctor?" I asked again. Alina met my eyes without hesitation. "The neurologist." There it was again. A name, a role, something official enough that questioning it sounded unreasonable on the surface. But the surface was exactly what she had been managing. I closed the cabinet slowly. "I want to see him," I said. Alina exhaled, almost like she had expected this exact sentence. "He doesn't take unscheduled family consultations," she replied. "I'm not unscheduled," I said. "I'm her daughter." That word again, daughter, like it still held the same weight it used to. Alina leaned against the counter. "You're not on her care authorization," she said gently. And there it was. The quiet loop she had built. Not present right arrow, not authorized right arrow, not informed right arrow, not present. A system that reinforced itself. From the hallway, I heard my mother cough again. Same fragile sound as always now. It had become a kind of background rhythm in the house. I looked toward it instinctively. Alina noticed. "She's sleeping," she said. It wasn't true. I could tell by the timing. But it didn't matter anymore whether it was true. It only mattered whether it was accepted. "I want to talk to her alone," I said. Alina didn't move. "That's not helpful right now," she replied. Something in my chest tightened. "Since when do you decide that?" I asked. A pause. She straightened slightly. "I'm the one here every day," she said. "I see what she can handle." I laughed once quietly. It didn't feel like humor. "You've turned her into a project," I said. Her expression changed slightly at that. Not anger, something more controlled, defensive refinement. "I've kept her stable," she corrected. Stable. That word again, the anchor for everything she was building. My mother appeared in the doorway then. Slow, careful, holding the frame lightly as if she needed it. "Why are you arguing again?" she asked softly. Her eyes moved between us like she was trying to avoid stepping into something sharp. Alina immediately softened her tone. "We're just discussing your routine," she said. My mother nodded, relieved by the simplicity of that explanation. I watched her carefully. "Mom," I said, lowering my voice, "do you remember when I last visited?" She hesitated. Alina spoke before she could answer. "She's been very busy," she said smoothly. My mother nodded again. "Yes," she said, "busy." The answer wasn't hers. I could feel it, not in words, but in rhythm, like something placed on top of her thought before it could form fully. I took a step closer. "Do you remember me coming last week?" I asked again. Her brow furrowed slightly. "I think," she started. Alina interrupted gently. "She gets tired easily in the mornings," she said. My mother relaxed immediately at that explanation, like the uncertainty had been taken away from her and replaced with something easier to hold. That was when I understood it more clearly. It wasn't just about what Alina said. It was about how quickly my mother stopped needing to think after she said it. I looked at Alina. "You're filling in her memory gaps," I said quietly. Alina didn't deny it. "I'm helping her not get overwhelmed," she said. "By what?" I asked. "Reality." A small silence. My mother shifted slightly. "I do like when you talk like this," she said quietly. Not anger, just discomfort. Directed at me. Alina stepped closer to her instantly. "Come sit down," she said gently. "You should eat something." My mother obeyed without hesitation. That obedience wasn't forced. It was smoother than that. Familiar, automatic. I stood there watching it, realizing something I didn't want to accept. The conflict wasn't just between me and Alina. It was between two versions of normal, one I remembered, and one that had been slowly rewritten without asking me if I agreed to it. And in that rewritten version, I was becoming the disruption, not the connection. Alina turned slightly toward me as my mother sat down. "You're upsetting her," she said quietly. And I finally saw the full structure she had built. Not just exclusion, but reversal. Because if my mother believed I caused distress, then removing me wasn't cruelty. It was care. And that made everything harder to fight. I stopped trying to argue after that morning. Not because I agreed with Alina, but because I started noticing something worse than disagreement. Pattern. Every conversation I had with my mother ended the same way now. Not in conflict, but in gentle confusion that always resolved in Alina's direction. Like my presence created friction that needed smoothing over. So instead of arguing, I started watching. And what I saw didn't feel loud or dramatic. It felt quiet enough to be missed. That afternoon, I sat in the living room while my mother napped and Alina sorted through a stack of envelopes at the dining table. The house had a strange rhythm now, periods of silence interrupted by small, controlled actions. A spoon against ceramic, paper being folded, a chair shifting slightly. Normal sounds, arranged differently. Alina didn't look up as she spoke. "She had a good morning," she said. I didn't respond. That alone felt like progress. On the coffee table in front of me was a framed photo I didn't recognize at first. Then I realized it was my mother, taken recently. Too recently. Her hair was neatly brushed, her expression calm. Too calm. In the photo, she was sitting next to Alina. Not me. I picked it up slowly. "When was this taken?" I asked. Alina finally glanced up. "A few weeks ago," she said. "I was here a few weeks ago," I replied. She nodded once. "You were working," she said. That sentence again, simple, final. I placed the photo back down carefully. "You're documenting her like she's already gone," I said quietly. Alina didn't react emotionally. That was her strength. She stayed structured. "I'm documenting stability," she corrected. From the hallway, my mother's voice called softly. "Alina." Not my name. Alina stood immediately. "I'm here," she said, already moving. I followed her instinctively. My mother was sitting on the edge of her bed again, holding a folded piece of paper. Her hands were shaking slightly, not dramatically, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. "What is this?" she asked. Alina took it gently, before I could see it properly. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "Just old paperwork." My mother looked uncertain. "It has my name," she said. Alina smiled softly, controlled reassurance. "It's from earlier records," she said. "We've already handled it." Handled it. That word again. I stepped closer. Let me see it, I said. Alina didn't move immediately. That pause mattered. Then she folded it carefully and placed it into a folder she had brought with her without me noticing. It's not necessary, she said. My mother looked between us, anxiety starting to build in small, visible ways, her fingers tightening around the edge of the blanket. I don't want problems, she said quietly. And immediately Alina responded. There are no problems, she said gently, just organization. Organization. Not conflict. Not disagreement. Organization. My mother nodded slowly, relieved again by simplicity being offered as comfort. I felt something inside me shift, not anger exactly, but recognition of something structural. Because every time uncertainty appeared, Alina removed it before it could grow. And every time she did that, my mother became more dependent on her for clarity. I stepped back into the hallway. Alina followed me this time. Her voice was quieter now. You need to stop doing that, she said. Doing what? I asked. Disturbing her routine. I turned toward her fully. That's not her routine, I said. That's your version of it. A pause. She didn't deny it. Instead, she said something softer. She's safer like this. Safe. That word should have been comforting. But in this house, it had started to mean something else. I looked at her carefully. You're isolating her from anyone who challenges what you say, I said. Alina's expression didn't change. I'm protecting her from confusion, she repeated. There it was again. The same justification, repeated until it became structure. From behind her, I heard my mother moving in the room again, slow, uncertain footsteps, like she was trying to decide whether to come closer or stay where she was told. Alina noticed too. Her tone softened immediately. She should rest, she said. But my mother had already appeared in the doorway. She looked tired now, not just physically, emotionally scattered in a way that made her gaze drift slightly before settling. I heard voices, she said. Alina stepped toward her instantly. It's okay, she said gently. Everything's fine. My mother nodded again. Then, almost hesitantly, she looked at me. And for a brief second, just a fraction of time, something like recognition sharpened in her expression. Myra, she said. My chest tightened. But before I could answer, Alina spoke again. She's just worried about you, she said softly to my mother. That's all. And just like that, the moment shifted. My mother's expression softened again, uncertainty replaced by reassurance. Oh, she said quietly, that's good. Good. As if concern itself had been explained away. I stood there watching it happen in real time. Not forced. Not dramatic. Just gently redirected, until even emotion stopped belonging to me in her presence. Alina guided my mother back into the room, speaking softly about rest, about calm, about comfort. And I realized something I couldn't ignore anymore. This wasn't just about access. It was about authorship. Whoever spoke to her last shaped what she believed was real. And right now, I was losing that position without anyone ever openly taking it from me. The envelope arrived the next morning. No stamp I recognized, no return address I expected, just my name written in careful, unfamiliar handwriting that made my stomach tighten before I even opened it. I didn't open it right away. I stood in the hallway with it in my hand, listening to the house wake up around me. The soft clink of a spoon, the distant sound of water running in the kitchen, Alina's footsteps moving with that same controlled rhythm she always had. Normal sounds, wrong feeling. When I finally opened the envelope, there was only one document inside. A legal notice. My eyes moved across it too quickly at first, like reading faster could make it less real. Then slower, as the meaning started to settle. Temporary guardianship review. Medical capacity reassessment request. Submitted by Alina V. My hand lowered slightly. It wasn't the words themselves that hit first. It was the fact that I had not been included in any of it. I heard Elena before I saw her. "You got it," she said. Not a question. I turned slowly. She was standing at the end of the hallway, holding a mug, calm as always, like she had already lived through this moment before and was just waiting for me to catch up. "You filed this," I said quietly. She didn't deny it. "Yes," she said simply. I looked back down at the document. "This is about my mother," I said. "It's about ensuring proper care," she corrected. That phrase again, proper care, structured, clean, unchallengeable on the surface. My voice dropped. "You're asking the state to reassess her capacity without telling me." Elena took a sip of her coffee. "You're emotionally involved," she said. "That's why you weren't included." That word, emotionally, was doing a lot of work in her sentences now. It wasn't descriptive. It was disqualifying. I stepped closer. "I'm her daughter," I said again. Elena nodded slightly, as if acknowledging a technical detail. "And I'm the one managing her day-to-day life," she replied. From the kitchen, I heard my mother's voice. "Elena." I didn't move. Elena did. She walked past me immediately, like I wasn't part of the decision-making space anymore, and entered the kitchen with practiced softness. "I'm here," she said gently. I stayed in the hallway, listening. My mother sounded uncertain. "What's a review?" she asked. A pause. Then Elena's voice, calm and measured. "Just a routine check," she said, "to make sure everything is still correct for you." "Correct," my mother repeated faintly. "Yes," Elena said, "for your safety." There was a silence after that. Then my mother spoke again, smaller. "Do I need that?" Elena's tone softened even more. "It's just paperwork," she said. "Don't worry about it." Paperwork. That word again. A way of shrinking something large enough to change someone's life into something harmless. I finally walked into the kitchen. My mother was sitting at the table now, hands wrapped around her mug. She looked at me briefly, then away again, like she wasn't sure where I fit into the conversation anymore. Elena stood by the counter. "I didn't want to alarm you," she said, still addressing my mother. My mother nodded slowly. "That's good," she said. Then, almost instinctively, she added, "Myra worries too much." The sentence didn't feel like hers anymore. It felt installed. I looked at her carefully. "Mom," I said softly. She looked up. There it was again, that flicker, recognition trying to surface. But Elena stepped in immediately. "She's just stressed," she said gently. "You should finish your tea." And my mother nodded. Just like that. The moment dissolved. I stood there watching it happen, feeling something settle into place in my mind that I couldn't undo anymore. This wasn't just influence. It was repetition, until resistance stopped forming. Elena turned slightly toward me as my mother looked down at her mug. "This is necessary," she said quietly. "For what?" I asked. Her answer came without hesitation. "For clarity." Clarity. A word that sounded harmless until you realized who defined it. I looked at the document again in my hand. "If the court agrees with you," I said slowly, "I lose access to everything." Elena met my eyes. "You lose confusion," she corrected. That was the moment it became clear. In her mind, she wasn't taking anything away from me. She was removing me from what she believed was a problem. From behind her, my mother spoke again softly. "Elena, I feel tired." Elena turned instantly. "Come on," she said gently. "Let's get you settled." My mother stood without resistance. She looked at me once more as she passed. But this time, there was no question in her eyes. Only distance. And I realized, standing there with the legal notice still in my hand, that the next step wouldn't be another conversation. Because conversations no longer reached her in a way I could trust. Something bigger was now deciding what she was allowed to understand. And I was already being quietly removed from it. The morning of the reassessment felt like a day that had been scheduled long before I was allowed to notice it. No one announced it in a dramatic way. No arguments, no confrontation at the door. Just Alina moving through the house earlier than usual, checking things that didn't need checking, straightening already straight objects, opening curtains that didn't need opening. Control disguised as routine. My mother was dressed when I saw her. That alone unsettled me. She usually took her time in the mornings now, slow movements, pauses between decisions. But today she was already sitting in the living room chair, hair brushed, cardigan buttoned incorrectly in a way that suggested someone else had helped her. Alina stood behind her, hands resting lightly on the chair back. "I told you it would be quick," Alina said softly. My mother nodded. "Yes," she replied, "quick." That repetition again, not agreement, echo. I stayed near the hallway entrance, watching. The doctor arrived just after 10. He wasn't dramatic, no intimidating presence, no authority in the way movies would have made it. He looked tired, professional in the way people become when their work involves quiet decisions about other people's lives. He greeted Alina first. That was the first imbalance. Then my mother. And only after that me. "Family?" he asked, glancing at me briefly. There was a pause before Alina answered. "This is my sister," she said. Not wrong, but not complete either. I felt something tighten in my chest, but I didn't interrupt. The consultation took place in the living room, the same room where I had watched my role slowly shrink over the past weeks. My mother answered questions slowly, carefully, like she was trying not to fail them. "What year is it?" the doctor asked gently. She hesitated. Alina answered before she could. "It's 2026, she said softly. My mother nodded, relieved. "Yes," she repeated. I noticed it then, the subtle relief that came whenever Alina supplied certainty. The doctor moved on. "Do you feel safe at home?" he asked. My mother paused longer this time. Yes," she said finally. "Alina takes care of me." A glance toward Alina. A reflex. Not an answer formed independently. I stepped forward slightly. "Can I speak to her alone for a moment?" I asked. Alina didn't even look at me. "She gets anxious when separated from familiar support," she said to the doctor. Not argument. Framing. The doctor nodded slowly, nodding something on his tablet. My mother looked uncomfortable now, not because of me, but because of the shift in attention. Like she was sensing tension without understanding its source. "I just want everything to be calm," she said again. That sentence again. The system's reset button. The doctor asked more questions. Memory, routine, medications. Each answer came slower, unless Alina clarified it first. And every time she clarified, my mother relaxed. It was subtle, almost invisible, but undeniable once you saw it. After about 20 minutes, the doctor stood. "I'll review the information," he said calmly. "There will be a formal recommendation." Alina nodded. "Thank you," she said. My mother stood too slowly. "It's done?" she asked. "Yes," Alina said gently. "It's done." My mother exhaled like something had been lifted from her. She didn't fully understand. And just like that, the room shifted into closure without resolution. The doctor left. Alina walked him out. I stayed behind with my mother. For a moment, the house was quiet again. Normal quiet. The kind that almost fooled you into believing nothing had changed. My mother sat down carefully. "You didn't speak much," she said to me. "I tried," I replied. She nodded slowly. "I get confused when too many people talk," she said. I looked at her. That sentence wasn't hers either. It had become something she used to explain discomfort she didn't have words for anymore. Mom, I said softly. She looked up. For a brief moment, I saw it again, that flicker of recognition trying to surface through layers of fatigue and repetition. But it didn't fully arrive. Instead, she smiled faintly. Alina said you care a lot, she said. My chest tightened. She said that, I asked. My mother nodded. She said you worry, she added, but it's okay. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not anger anymore. Something quieter. Realization that had stopped trying to be gentle. From the hallway, Alina returned. The moment she entered, my mother's posture changed slightly. Not dramatic, just alignment. Alina didn't look at me. She did well, she said softly. My mother nodded again. Yes, she said, it's done. I stood there watching them both, understanding something I hadn't wanted to accept fully until now. The reassessment wasn't just about my mother. It was about which version of her reality would be considered valid moving forward. And I was no longer the person defining that space. I was the variable being removed. The decision didn't arrive like I expected it to. There was no dramatic phone call, no confrontation, no final argument that ended everything cleanly. It came quietly. A printed letter left on the kitchen counter, beside a bowl that had already been washed. Alina was not in the room when I found it. That was intentional. My hands didn't shake when I picked it up. That surprised me more than anything else had in the past few weeks. Temporary guardianship adjustment approved. Medical recommendation accepted. Primary decision-making authority, Alina V. I read it twice. Not because it was unclear. Because my mind kept trying to find a version of it that meant something else. From the hallway, I heard my mother moving slowly. Familiar sounds now, chairs shifting, the soft drag of slippers on wood. Alina, she called gently. I didn't move. Alina appeared a moment later, calm as always, like nothing in the world had changed in the last hour. It's okay, she said softly as she passed me. Not to me. To the space in front of her. My mother looked relieved immediately when she saw her. What does it mean? She asked. Alina sat beside her with practiced ease. It just means everything is organized now, she said gently. My mother nodded slowly. That's good, she replied. Good. That word again. I stood by the counter holding the letter, realizing something simple and final. There was no moment where I was going to be proved right. That kind of clarity didn't exist here anymore. I walked into the living room. Alina, I said quietly. She looked up. Not surprised, not defensive, just ready. You did this without me, I said. A pause. Yes, she replied. No denial. No justification yet. Just acknowledgement. I looked at my mother. She was watching us, but not understanding the weight of what was happening. That was the part that hurt in a way I couldn't fully name. Mom, I said softly. She looked at me. There it was again, that flicker. But it didn't hold. Instead, she turned slightly toward Alina. I don't want stress, she said quietly. Alina nodded immediately. You won't have any, she said. And I saw it then, not as a single moment, but as a full pattern finally complete. My presence had become synonymous with tension in this house. Not because I caused it, but because it had been consistently framed that way until it felt true enough to act on. I placed the letter on the table. So that's it, I said quietly. Alina stood. It doesn't have to be conflict, she said. I almost laughed again, but this time it didn't even try to form. You removed me from her decisions, I said. I made sure she isn't overwhelmed, she corrected. My mother stood slowly too, uncertain again. I don't understand, she said. Neither of us answered her immediately. That silence was the most honest thing in the room. Then Alina stepped closer to her, voice softening again. You don't need to understand it, she said gently. You just need to rest. My mother nodded. Relief returned instantly. And that was when I understood something that finally settled without resistance. This was no longer something I could argue myself back into. Because the system didn't require me to be wrong. It only required me to be unnecessary. I looked at my mother one last time. Not for reaction. Not for recognition. Just for presence. And I saw it clearly now. Not cruelty, not malice, not even conscious betrayal. Just a life being gently reorganized around what felt easiest to hold. And I was no longer part of what felt easy. I picked up my keys from the counter. Elena didn't stop me. That mattered too. She didn't need to. As I reached the door, my mother spoke softly behind me. Myra. I turned. For a fraction of a second, something almost returned. But it didn't fully arrive. She smiled faintly instead, uncertain but calm. Take care, she said. Not goodbye. Not choice. Just closure shaped by someone else's version of peace. I stepped outside. The door closed gently behind me. And for the first time in weeks, the air didn't feel controlled. It just felt open. Not victorious. Not resolved. Just real again.